Good afternoon. Welcome back to Lynn Lowdown. I'm Danny Vittori, and today I have on a very different guest, the co-founder of Mutt Society. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So real quick, could you just introduce yourself? And I personally hadn't really heard of your organization until I saw it on social media. So would you be able to kind of tell people a bit more about it?
Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of the Mutt Society. We were founded in 2016. We do a lot of different things, but one of our main tenets is getting kids on bikes. And, you know, there's an extensive story of how that all came to be, but our biggest initiative for the last 3 years has been focused on Lynn, getting children of the Pathways program on bicycles every summer.
And that connects back to really some of your mission statements, introducing bikes and a trail love things. So can you explain a little bit about why you think that's so important for kids to have?
Yeah, it's always an interesting question. People ask why you're not giving food or money, and there are those organizations and they're incredible, and it is more of a, you know, a vital priority sometimes, but we also feel very strongly that the two wheels that a bicycle offers is just something that gives freedom for kids, the ability to have transportation, so some functional benefits. And then mental health is obviously a big topic these days, and I think some of that freedom and transportation and the fun of it, connecting with friends and all of that gives a really valuable aspect to childhood. We don't only focus on kids, so we do get some adults on bikes when they you know, don't have the ability to have other transportation. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing just about the bikes, which I always think is so interesting, is that when we say kids on bikes, I think people think a small child, but it's really 0 to 18. Mm-hmm. And every year we teach, you know, 16, 17, 18-year-old how to ride a bike. And they've just never had the opportunity. They've never owned a bike themselves. It's really interesting. So a lot of us have grown up in this community and in my community with bicycles being something that they don't particularly think is out of the ordinary. Yeah. But when you've never had it, it is a really cool, big thing for an individual.
Oh yeah, it can be a huge deal. And I am curious, how did you get connected with Pathways? You mentioned those are the children that you give the bikes to.
Someone on our board, Tanya Lilik from Swampscott, she used to be on the board at Pathways and made that introduction, and then her and her family do a ton leading up to that drive, collecting bikes, reaching out to sponsors, and helping during the day just organize it. So her and then the Pathways team are rather well connected, and it was just a perfect opportunity to have kind of a pointed initiative in the community.
And you're a totally grassroots organization, so all the bikes, everything's donated, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a mixture of donations and new purchases. It's basically all year. Just this year, it used to be in my basement. My wife was fine with it, but it was funny. But we just got a storage container, so all year, let's say, for an example, 2003 and 2004, leading up to the event, people would drop off bikes. We would go around Facebook Marketplace and gather bikes. And then the last couple weeks, Pathways puts a list together of the kids, their height, their age, and so we match as many bikes as we can. And then the last couple of weeks, we'll purchase some new bikes, or have, this year we had a last-minute donation of $2,000 that helped just kind of fill in some of the gaps. So, yeah.
And how many bikes did you give out this past year?
So it's an interesting fact that people don't realize is that in order to get, we did 130 bikes, but in order to get 130 kids on bikes, all different sizes, and sometimes they request a different, you know, specific kind, you have to gather around 200, 250 bikes. So the amount of bikes that we gathered and have a good start for the 2005 season too, was a lot higher, but I think 130 kids grabbed bikes on, was it June 15th?
I mean, that was what I saw, I think, on social media. It looked amazing.
Yeah, it's I try to lead the organization or co-lead it with my partner Andrew, with as little stress as possible. We all have, the whole board has their own, full-time jobs.
Right.
And I don't want to stress people out when they're looking for donations for us or dropping anything off. But it does get a little, it just gets, there's a little anxiety. Is it going to work this time? Josh and I went back and forth. He's the gentleman from Pathways. And, he's like, do you think you're going to be able to do it? And, yeah, we got this. But it was like, I wonder if we can. But the moment that you pull up into the Pathways parking lot and you start unloading those bikes, and then you start seeing the kids come in, there's like tears in eyes. It's just the most incredible thing. And like you started off with, it's bikes. It's not it's not shelter. It's not food. So there are things that are very amazing that other people focus on, but there is just something really special about the bikes. It's incredible. So.
And like you said, if people have always had a bike or a waiting room, they may not think of it as a big deal, but you seem to have found that almost that hole or a gap to say, no, this can be a huge deal for these kids.
Yeah, it's very interesting how many children you meet that just don't have the opportunity to have a bicycle. And it is something that I never thought of once. I mean, I think my first bike I was given maybe at Christmas. Second bike, I mowed a bunch of lawns to get my dream bike or whatever. But any of those little opportunities, now you realize there are things that some people don't have. And and people don't realize that. When you say, hey, I taught an 18-year-old how to ride a bike the other day and gave them their first bike in their life, they're like, oh my goodness. That's a thing, Yeah. So it is cool.
And you mentioned you've been really focused on Lynn in the last few years. Has there been any other initiatives or people that you've partnered with?
Yeah, we've done some seed work with the Lawrence School District, and just having conversations, doing a couple group rides, nothing as extensive. And then we did make a connection between GT Bikes and the Framingham School District. They were having a challenge with some of the bus system was not available for every kid, and their absentee numbers were pretty high. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't fund it, but we made some connections and kind of helped lead that initiative to get 200 bikes for kids down there too. So people usually ask, like, how do you choose where you put your time and effort and money? Yeah. And up to this point, it's been very serendipitous. It hasn't been a very planned thing. It's been people that have made connections and we've said yes and then made things happen. We're not extremely well funded. So, any funding just expands what we can do. But right now we're kind of just focused on that Lynn event and smaller initiatives that come up during the year.
Like you said, sometimes just the connections, that's a great way to build your network. And it doesn't have to be all planned. Sometimes it's just you see a need and you go try to help as best you can.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. Yeah.
And I will ask, I'm just curious, could you do, again, very quickly, another thing that is mentioned is helping aspiring athletes, professionals. So that's a little bit on the flip side, but I'm just curious about that piece of it.
So Andrew and my focus in the mountain biking world is downhill mountain biking. So it's, there's a couple of different focuses, but I guess in any mountain biking, actually in any sport, when you start to aspire to be a professional athlete, there's a lot of work and money and time and transportation, equipment that comes along with that. Yeah. And if you can imagine people or individuals that can't afford a bike or haven't had the opportunity to have a bike, then that's just a whole nother universe of inability to participate. When we first started conversations, before it was Mutt Society, there was a young gentleman, Jake, that went to the mountain that we always went to, that was an excellent rider, but didn't have any of the right equipment, wasn't supported at all. And so that's kind of where that idea came from. Mm-hmm. And since then it's grown from that. We have whole crew of ambassadors, so they're just young kids wanting to spread the word, which is very cool. Some of them have ability or access, some of them don't. We kind of quietly help in that regard. And then we also sponsor a small crew of aspiring junior experts or junior professionals or expert professionals in the downhill space. So transition factory racing is one that is completely in line with our ideals. And so we do an annual support of that team as well.
So that all sounds just so cool. I'm not any sort of a professional biker by any means, but I love learning more about it. And I do have to wrap it up in a moment, but is there anything else that I hadn't mentioned you wanted to say?
I don't think so. I think if anybody wants to help, it would be incredible. Like I said earlier, we don't stress about very much. We try to just keep it pretty casual, but the more we have, the more we can do. And I really appreciate the time today. Thank you.
Of course, and I appreciate you coming down to make the time. And once again, I'm Danny Vittori. This has been the Lynn Lowdown, and we'll see you next week with more guests.